You know, some stories are just so powerful, they become legends. And the Titanic? That's one of them. It was way more than just a ship. It was this grand promise of a new modern world. But its story, as we all know, is one of ambition, of tragedy, and it leaves a legacy that still fascinates us more than 100 years later. So let's dive into the story of the dream, the disaster, and why it still captures our imagination today.
Okay, before we go anywhere else, this right here tells you so much of the story. This is the single biggest, most critical failure of the Titanic, laid out in plain numbers. You've got an estimated 2,224 people on board, but the lifeboats? They could only hold 1,178. That's barely half. And the craziest part? This wasn't some mistake. It was, believe it or not, technically legal. The safety laws were just so dangerously out of date, they hadn't caught up to these massive new ships. It was a disaster just waiting to happen.
So how did a situation like that even happen? Well, to really get the tragedy, you first have to understand the dream. The Titanic wasn't just a way to get from point A to point B. No, it was built to be the ship of dreams, a huge floating symbol of just how ambitious and confident people were back in the Gilded Age. I mean, the sheer scale of this thing was just incredible. Construction started back in 1909 in Belfast. It took more than 2 years of non-stop work just to get the massive hull into the water. By the time it finished its sea trials in April 1912, it was, literally, the largest moving object ever built by human hands. Now here's where the business strategy gets really interesting. The White Star Line, the company that built it, wasn't trying to make the fastest ship out there. Nope, their rivals at Cunard already had that covered. Instead, they came up with the Olympic-class liners, that's Titanic and its sister ships, to win in a completely different way, by being the biggest and most luxurious ships the world had ever laid eyes on. And to say it was luxurious is a huge understatement. I mean, just listen to this. For first-class passengers, you had things that were just unheard of on a ship. A saltwater swimming pool, a gym, a squash court, even a fancy Turkish bath. The best suites? We're talking the equivalent of over $140,000 in today's money. This wasn't a ship, it was a floating palace. And all this belief in its size and its tech, well, that's what led to this now infamous claim. Now, the White Star Line never officially said it's unsinkable, but the phrase practically unsinkable was all over the newspapers and ads. It created this powerful myth, this idea that the ship was just invincible. And look, this wasn't just marketing hype. It was backed up by some seriously cutting-edge engineering for the time. The hull had 16 separate watertight compartments. The whole design was so clever that the ship could actually stay afloat even if the first 4 compartments were totally flooded. It really seemed like they had thought of everything.
So the ship is finally built. Its reputation for being indestructible is locked in the public's mind, and the stage is set for its very first highly anticipated trip from England to New York City.
On board, you basically had a perfect snapshot of society from that era, and it was starkly divided by class. The biggest group by a long shot was the 709 people traveling in third class. And these divisions, which were so rigid on land, were about to become a matter of life and death out on the ocean. It was literally a tale of 2 different worlds, all on the same boat. Up in the fancy first-class suites, you had some of the richest people on Earth, like John Jacob Astor IV. And then, way down in steerage, you had hundreds of families from all over Europe who had sold everything they owned for a ticket to a new life in America. All their hopes, literally everything, was on this one ship. For 4 days, the voyage was perfect, smooth sailing. But then came the night of April 14th, 1912. It was cold, the water was eerily calm, and out there in the middle of the pitch-black North Atlantic, everything was about to change forever. And the end, it came so fast. At 11:40 p.m., a lookout frantically spots an iceberg dead ahead. They try to turn, but it's too late. The ship scrapes along the side. Just 25 minutes after that, the captain gets the terrible news. The ship is doomed. Less than 3 hours after hitting the ice, the unsinkable Titanic was gone. So how? How could the unsinkable ship sink? Well, it all came down to a single terrible number, 5. You see, the iceberg didn't tear a huge gash in the ship like a lot of people think. It actually buckled the steel plates along the side, which let water pour into 5 of those watertight compartments. The ship was a marvel, yeah, designed to survive 4, but 5? That was a death sentence. And in the chaos of the evacuation, with not enough lifeboats and time running out, those class divisions became brutally, tragically clear. The numbers tell a grim story. If you were a first-class passenger,
You had a 62% chance of surviving. For a third-class passenger, though, that chance plummeted to just 26%. Your ticket had, in many cases, determined your fate.
The sinking of the Titanic sent a shockwave around the globe. This incredible symbol of modern technology had just vanished, taking more than 1,500 people with it. But out of that unimaginable loss, some truly revolutionary changes were about to come.
This disaster forced everyone to wake up. It was a massive catalyst for change. Inquiries were held around the world, and they led directly to the very first Safety of Life at Sea Convention, or SOLAS. It created sweeping new rules, including one that sounds so obvious now. There must be enough lifeboats for every single person on board. The International Ice Patrol was also created, and they're still out there today, monitoring those same sea lanes for icebergs.
For over 70 years, the Titanic was just gone, lost in the deep, turning from history into a kind of myth. Then, in 1985, an explorer named Robert Ballard and his team finally found the wreck, resting 2.5 miles below the surface. Its discovery brought the story roaring back to life, and the site is now rightly protected as a memorial.
And of course, the story just lives on, doesn't it? From books to documentaries to one of the biggest movies of all time, the Titanic is just a permanent part of our culture. It's become this powerful cautionary tale about ambition, about class, and about the raw power of nature.
Which really leaves us with this final thought. I mean, we live in an age of space travel and AI, so why are we still so completely drawn to the story of a steamship that sank over 100 years ago? Maybe it's because the Titanic is a humbling reminder. It reminds us that no matter how advanced we think we are, we're still vulnerable, and that the most compelling stories will always, always be the human ones.